When two bikers picked on the wrong woman, they didn't just face a fight, they challenged a fearless Navy commander whose quiet strength would change lives forever. Rachel Steele was not the kind of woman who liked attention. She had spent more than 15 years in the U.S. Navy, rising through the ranks to become a respected commander. She had led teams, handled dangerous missions, trained younger sailors, and traveled to places most people never even imagined. But when she was off duty, she liked peace, quiet, and being just another face in the crowd. No titles, no medals, no uniforms, just Rachel on her own, with the sound of the road and the engine of her motorcycle. It was a sunny Friday morning when Rachel rode into a small town in Northern California. She had planned this solo trip for weeks, carefully choosing a place that wasn't crowded and where no one would recognize her. It was her short break before returning to the base. The town was quiet, lined with tall pine trees and a few local businesses. There were hardly any tourists. Just the way she liked it, she wore a plain black leather jacket, worn jeans, and black boots. Her dark brown hair was tied back under a faded navy blue cap. Her bike, a dark blue Yamaha, looked well used but strong. It had taken her across states before. She loved the feeling of freedom when she rode. No one giving orders, no one needing help, no one expecting anything from her. Just the road and her thoughts. As she entered the town, Rachel spotted a small roadside diner with an old neon sign blinking open. It looked like a place that had been there for decades. She parked her bike carefully, checked her phone for any urgent messages. There were none, and stepped inside the diner. The smell of fresh coffee, bacon, and pancakes filled the air. A waitress, probably in her mid-20s, smiled at her and pointed to a booth near the window. Rachel nodded silently and walked over to the booth, placing her helmet on the seat beside her. She liked sitting near windows. It gave her a clear view of everything happening outside. The diner was nearly empty. An elderly couple sat in the far corner, sharing toast. A trucker was reading a newspaper at the counter. And then there were the two bikers. They sat in the booth across the room, loud and rowdy, dressed in sleeveless denim jackets covered in patches, their voices filling the space, even though the place was quiet. Rachel noticed them right away, not because they were dangerous, but because they reminded her of people she had dealt with before. Loud men who thought they were tough. She had seen their kind in bars near Navy bases, in street corners in foreign towns, and sometimes even among the lower ranks in her own military life. But she didn't judge. She just observed. The waitress came by with a menu, but Rachel already knew what she wanted. Coffee, black. 2 scrambled eggs. Toast, she said softly. You got it, the waitress said. Still smiling, Rachel leaned back in her seat and looked outside. A dog was barking in the distance. A breeze moved the trees. Everything felt calm, but not for long. The two bikers, having finished their food, turned their attention toward her. At first it was just looks. One of them, tall with a beard and dark sunglasses, whispered something to the other and laughed. The shorter one, with tattoos crawling down his arms, grinned and looked in her direction. Rachel didn't respond. She sipped her coffee slowly. Double quotes. Hey, nice bike, the taller one called out across the room. Is that yours, sweetheart? Looked up. Her eyes were calm but focused, she said, then went back to her coffee. The man laughed. Didn't expect a little lady like you to ride something like that. Rachel didn't answer this time. She had learned a long time ago that some people were not worth responding to. The waitress returned with her food, placing the plate down carefully, and gave her a slightly nervous glance. She had probably seen trouble before in this diner and could sense when something was about to go wrong. You riding alone? The shorter biker asked. He had now stood up and was slowly walking toward her booth. Rachel raised her eyes again. Just eating breakfast, she said, her voice steady. And clear, the man leaned against the booth. You got a name, tough girl? She placed her fork down gently. Her face stayed neutral. I didn't ask for company. There was a long silence. The taller man had also stood up now, walking slowly behind his friend. Other customers in the diner were now paying attention. The waitress stood frozen near the counter, watching with wide eyes. Rachel stood up. She was not tall, maybe 5'7", but there was something about the way she moved that made people watch her. Calm, silent, measured. She picked up her helmet with one hand and placed a few bills on the table with the other. "I'm leaving," she said. "Let's not make a scene." But the shorter biker stepped in front of her.
"Oh, you think you're
"Too good to talk to us? Maybe we don't let you leave so easy." The taller one chuckled. "Come on, Duke. Maybe she just needs a little help getting back on her bike." Rachel looked at both of them, her expression unchanged. "I'm asking one last time," she said. "Move." They didn't. What happened next was so fast that most people only realized what they had seen after it was already over. Rachel took a small step to the side, dodging the shorter man's arm as he reached for her. In one swift motion, she twisted his wrist, forced him to his knees, and disarmed a pocket knife he had just started to pull out. Before the taller one could even react, she kicked his leg out from under him, grabbed his collar, and used his own weight to throw him into a nearby table. Dishes crashed, chairs fell. The diner fell completely silent. Rachel stood perfectly still in the middle of the room, one hand holding her helmet, the other empty. Both bikers lay on the floor groaning, not seriously hurt but clearly shocked. Confused and completely overpowered, she looked around. Her voice was calm but strong. "They'll be fine," she said. "They just need time to think." Then she turned to the waitress. "Sorry for the mess." The young woman nodded slowly, almost in disbelief. Rachel walked out of the diner, her boots crunching lightly against the gravel. She put on her helmet, started her bike, and rode off. Down the road, inside the diner, people slowly started talking again. The old couple shook their heads in amazement. The waitress ran over to check on the bikers who were now sitting up, holding their sides and cursing under their breath. "What the hell was that?" the shorter one asked. "Who was that woman?" At the counter said aloud. Nobody had an answer. But later that afternoon, a customer who had filmed the entire event on their phone uploaded the video online. Within hours, it had thousands of views. By evening, it had gone viral. And people all over the country were asking the same question: who was the woman in the diner who took down two grown men like it was nothing? Rachel, meanwhile, kept riding. She didn't check her phone. She didn't look back. She found a quiet spot near a lake, set up her small camp, and watched the sun go down. To her, it had been just another day. She had stood her ground, stayed calm, and protected herself. She wasn't proud of what happened, but she wasn't ashamed either. She had lived long enough to know that sometimes you have to act. And when you do, you act with precision, with control, and without anger. She didn't need the world to know who she was, but soon they would. The town of Pine Creek was not used to excitement. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, and the biggest news usually came from the local bakery running out of apple pie. But everything changed within 24 hours. After a quiet, tough woman walked into a roadside diner, took down two big bikers without breaking a sweat, and disappeared like smoke in the wind. The video that captured the incident had now traveled across every corner of the internet. It was shaky and recorded on an old phone, but it was clear enough. The two bikers had tried to corner her. She didn't say much. And then, in a flash of movement, they were both on the ground, moaning, surprised and defeated. The video didn't just go viral, it exploded. News outlets picked it up. Comment sections were flooded with questions. Who was this woman? Where did she learn to move like that? Was she a cop? A soldier? Stint woman? Or maybe some kind of secret agent? Began slowing the video down, analyzing every movement. Martial arts experts online tried to explain what she had done. One even said that kind of movement takes years of training, maybe even military background. Whoever she is, you don't mess with her. But Rachel Steele had no idea about any of this. After leaving the diner, she had stayed off the main roads, taking long, winding paths through the hills. She enjoyed riding alone. The sound of her motorcycle was like a heartbeat, steady and strong. She found a peaceful spot near a lake, where she set up her small tent, cooked a simple dinner, and stared at the stars above. She didn't know she was becoming an internet sensation. And even if she did, she wouldn't care. Rachel wasn't. Looking for attention? She wasn't trying to prove anything. She had handled herself the same way she would have during any mission, carefully, with control. That's how she had been trained, and that's how she lived. It didn't let her emotions lead. She stayed sharp, even when the world around her was full of chaos. Back in Pine Creek, two bikers, Duke and Ripper, were still recovering from the hit their egos had taken. They had left the diner quickly after the incident, hoping no one would recognize them. But the internet wasn't kind. People identified them. Their photos were shared alongside comments like "got humbled." And this is what happens when you mess with the wrong person. The humiliation was too much to ignore. Duke was furious. He'd always thought of himself as a tough guy, someone no one messed with. But now, even his biker friends were teasing him. Every bar he walked into, people gave him looks. Some smiled, others laughed. Ripper tried to brush it off as a joke, but deep down he felt embarrassed too. They started asking around, trying to find out who she was. They asked the waitress, but she didn't know. She only remembered her first name, Rachel. Customers said they had seen a Navy emblem on her helmet. That was the only real clue they had. "Maybe she's military," Duke said. "She sure fought like it," Ripper replied. They went back to the diner's parking lot the next day, hoping to find more clues. But Rachel was long gone. Her bike left no traces. There were no credit card records. She had paid in cash. The waitress said she hadn't given a last name. It was like she had vanished. But Duke wasn't ready to let it go. "She made a fool out of us," he said, pacing. "Now the whole world's laughing. I don't care who she is. She needs to be taught a lesson." Ripper wasn't so sure. "Did you see what she did to us? That wasn't normal. If she's trained, if she's military, going after her might be the worst idea of your life." But Duke was stubborn. He didn't like being embarrassed. And even worse, he didn't like being ignored. "I don't want to fight her again," he said. "I just want to know who she is." Meanwhile, people online were doing the detective work for them. A few eagle-eyed viewers noticed the emblem on Rachel's helmet in the video. One person guessed it was Navy-related. Another matched it with a specific fleet unit stationed in San Diego. Then someone found an old interview from 5 years ago. A female Navy officer talking about leadership and discipline. Her name was Commander Rachel Steele. Her face was a little more serious in the interview, but her sharp eyes and strong jaw were unmistakable. Internet sleuths connected the dots. That's when the story really caught fire. Suddenly, Rachel Steele was trending. "Commander takes down 2 bikers like a ghost. Don't mess with a Navy warrior she." Ruin your whole day, female. Hero or internet legend? Meet the real Rachel Steele. Rachel still didn't know. She was on the road, stopping in quiet towns, sleeping under the stars, turning her phone on only to check messages from the base. And there were a few. One of her fellow officers had left a message, "Rachel, call me. Something's happening. You're all over the news." She finally stopped at a gas station, bought a coffee, and connected to Wi-Fi. That's when she saw the messages. Over 50 notifications, articles, videos, comments from strangers, people calling her a hero, others asking if she'd train them, some even calling her the silent guardian. She stared at her screen for a while, not saying anything. She hadn't meant for this to happen. It was just a simple morning at a diner. Men got too close. She protected herself. That was all still. She knew how things worked. When something caught fire online, it spread fast and wide. People created their own versions of the story. Some exaggerated it. Others turned her into a symbol. She sighed and called her friend. "Back, Commander Steele," her friend answered. "You're famous." "I didn't ask to be, I know, but the video's everywhere. News, social media, even Navy chat groups." "Did I break any rules?" "No," the friend replied. "You acted in self-defense. Off-duty, no problem there. But people want to know who you are. They're impressed, inspired, some are scared." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "I didn't hurt them badly," she said. "I just stopped them." "You did it like a ghost," her friend said, laughing. "Mean seriously? Rat, you took them down without even raising your voice." Rachel allowed herself a small smile. "I was hoping for a quiet trip. Yeah, well, not anymore." News reporters started showing up in Pine Creek. The waitress at the diner gave a few short interviews. The owner of the diner said business had doubled in 2 days. Everyone wanted to sit at the booth where the mysterious woman had once sipped her coffee. Meanwhile, Duke and Ripper were getting more unwanted attention. Reporters tracked them down. They refused to talk. One of them slammed a camera to the ground, but the damage was done. Their reputations were broken. They were no longer feared. They were a joke. That's when something strange happened. Instead of staying angry, Ripper began to reflect. He watched the video again and again. The way Rachel moved, the way she warned them, the calm in her voice.
He couldn't stop thinking about it.
She didn't want to fight, he told Duke one night. We pushed her, Duke scoffed. You're getting soft? No, Ripper said. I'm getting smart. Ripper began asking questions about Rachel. Not to fight her, but to understand her. He wanted to know what made a person that calm, that strong, that silent. He read about Navy training, discipline, combat breathing. He even signed up for a local self-defense class quietly without telling Duke. Back on the road, Rachel was finally making her way back to base. Her short vacation was ending, and she needed to prepare for a new training cycle. But things had changed. As she entered the gate, several young sailors stood straighter. Some nodded with respect. Others whispered. Rachel ignored it all. She met with her commanding officer, who smiled as she walked in. Commander Steele, he said, shaking her hand. You're quite the topic of discussion. Didn't mean to be, she replied. No, he said, and you didn't do anything wrong. If anything, you've become a quiet symbol of strength. I was just trying to eat breakfast. The officer laughed. Well, he made it very difficult for men like those to enjoy breakfast again. Rachel smiled politely, but didn't respond. He leaned forward. There's something you need to... No, we've had requests. Civilians asking if you'd speak at self-defense events, schools, veteran programs, inspired people. I didn't plan that, she said. Sometimes inspiration happens without planning. Rachel left the meeting and returned to her quarters. She looked in the mirror for a long time, not out of pride but curiosity. What did people see in her? Why was everyone so amazed? Maybe it was because they expected a woman to be soft, quiet, afraid. But Rachel had never fit that image. She wasn't angry at the world, just focused. She had trained for years not to fight, but to be ready if she had to. When the moment came, she had acted. It wasn't about power, it was about peace. And sometimes peace needed to be protected. Even in a small diner on a quiet morning, Rachel Steele had always been a woman of control. In the Navy, she had faced situations more dangerous than anything most people could imagine: hostile missions, emergency rescues, negotiations under pressure. She had trained her body and mind for years to stay calm, think fast, and act only when necessary. But nothing in her training had prepared her for what was happening now. It had been 2 weeks since the diner incident. 2 weeks since a quiet breakfast turned into a viral moment. And now, no matter where she went, people recognized her. Not in a loud way, but in the small shifts of their eyes. A second longer glance. A quiet whisper when she passed. It was clear her silence, her strength, her movements in that video had turned her into something more than a name. She was now a symbol, but being a symbol didn't make life easier, made it heavier. On the surface, things seemed fine. She returned to duty, trained with her team, completed her reports. Her superiors respected her. Her fellow officers admired her. Young recruits tried to speak with her whenever they could, asking for tips, asking what it was like to be the woman from the video. But Rachel didn't like the attention. She had always believed that strength should be quiet, not loud. She had done what she did because it was necessary, not because she wanted to prove anything. She started spending more time alone. After training, she'd skip group dinners. She rode her motorcycle to the far edge of the base and sat by the ocean for hours. The sea helped her breathe. Its endless movement calmed her thoughts, but even there she couldn't escape the feeling that something had changed. It was like the world was watching her now, waiting for her next move. One evening she received a letter. Not an email, not a message, but a handwritten letter. It was from Ripper the biker she had taken down. She stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. The handwriting was shaky but careful. The letter began with an apology. Ripper said he had never really known what real strength looked like until that day. He admitted he was wrong about her, about himself. He said he had been angry for most of his life, trying to act tough to hide how lost he felt. But seeing someone like Rachel calm, disciplined, and focused shook something inside him. He said he had joined a local self-defense class, that he wanted to change, that he didn't expect forgiveness, but he wanted her to know that what she did mattered. Rachel read the letter twice. She didn't cry, but she felt something she hadn't expected. Heaviness. She wasn't angry with Ripper. She didn't even hate Duke, the other biker. What she felt was more complicated. Responsibility, not guilt, but a quiet understanding that her actions had created waves far beyond what she intended. She had only meant to stop two men from threatening her, but now one of them was trying to rebuild his life, and she had somehow become part of his story. The next day, she received a call from her commanding officer. A reporter had been asking questions, trying to get a one-on-one interview with her. They were offering a large amount of money. Rachel didn't even hesitate. "No," she said firmly. But the pressure didn't stop. She received dozens of messages every day. Some were from people thanking her. Others asked her to speak at events or be the face of women's defense programs. There were even offers from television shows. She deleted them all. It wasn't her world. But the hardest part came when she realized that even inside the Navy, things were changing. People started treating her differently. A few of the older officers' men who had once seen her only as a fellow professional began to act distant. They didn't say anything rude, but she could feel the shift. Fewer invitations to leadership meetings, fewer chances to speak in planning discussions. She had become the internet commander. Not everyone liked it. One day during training, a younger male officer joked behind her back, "Better not upset Commander Steelshay, might throw us across the room." Rachel heard it. She said, "Nothing," but it stung. She had worked for years to build her position not through showmanship, but through service. And now, people looked at her and saw only the video. They forgot the years of missions, sacrifices, and late nights. They remembered only the moment when she acted in defense. It made her wonder, had she lost something in that moment of strength? Had the world taken the real her and replaced her with a version they had made up? She stopped riding her motorcycle for a few days. She avoided town. She spent her nights reading instead of riding. She didn't feel like herself. But one afternoon, as she was walking near the training field, she noticed a small group of new recruits practicing hand-to-hand combat. One of the female trainees, smaller than the others, was struggling to keep up. The trainer was giving instructions, but the girl looked nervous, unsure of her own movements. Rachel walked closer. Watching quietly, when the session ended, the girl turned around and saw her. "Commander Steele?" she asked, voice nervous. Rachel nodded. Could I ask you something?" Rachel paused, then said, "Of course." The girl looked down. "I watched the video. I know you probably hate hearing about it, but it gave me courage. I joined the Navy because I saw someone who didn't yell, didn't brag, but just stood up. You made me believe I could be strong too." Rachel didn't speak for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Strength isn't about size or words. It's about control. The more you know yourself, the less you need to prove." The girl smiled. "Thank you, ma'am." Rachel walked away slowly. But something in her chest felt lighter. Later that evening, she took out Ripper's letter again. She reread the final line. "You didn't just stop us, you changed something in me. I don't know why, but you did." She finally understood what had been bothering her. The world had seen one side of her action, but they hadn't seen the years behind it. The silence, the training, the failure, the doubt, the bruises and broken bones. The nights when she wanted to quit. That single moment in the diner didn't define her. was just one page in a much longer book. She decided to respond. She wrote a short letter to Ripper. She didn't say much, just that she was glad he was trying to change, and that strength was about what you build, not what you break. She told him to keep training and to stay away from people who pull him down. She didn't give her full address, just a simple return message. Then she put on her jacket, grabbed her helmet, and walked toward her bike. She rode that night not to escape, but to feel free again. She rode fast. Through the hills, the wind on her face, the stars above her. The road twisted and turned, but she didn't slow down. She was not running anymore. She was remembering who she was. She had been through worse than this. She had been in battlefields, seen friends fall, stood in silence when others couldn't. She had earned every scar on her body and every calm thought in her mind. The world could turn her into a story if it wanted to, but she knew the truth. She wasn't strong because she beat two men. She was strong because she had survived everything. Before that moment, Anne still chose peace. The wind was strong that evening, rushing past Rachel's face as her motorcycle sped along the empty highway. The road stretched endlessly ahead, the sky painted with fading orange light from the setting sun. Her helmet blocked most of the noise, but her thoughts were loud inside. She had been riding for almost 2 hours without a break, not because she had somewhere to go, but because she needed to feel the motion. She needed to feel free again. Something had changed in her over the past few weeks. Not just the attention or the whispers or the letters, but something inside. A small crack had formed, an uncomfortable feeling that she couldn't ignore. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't regret. It was something more difficult to name. A quiet weight pressing down, reminding her that she had become something she didn't ask to be. She slowed down when she reached a high lookout point overlooking the sea. Parking the bike on the gravel side, she climbed off, took off her helmet, and sat on the edge of a flat rock. The ocean roared below her, waves crashing against the cliffs. She let the wind push her hair back as she stared out into the horizon. She thought about the girl from the training ground, the one who said Rachel had given her courage. She thought about Ripper's letter and the change it described. She thought about the silence that followed every time people stared at her, expecting her to be more than she felt. For so long, Rachel had worked hard to stay invisible. She believed real strength didn't need applause or approval. But now her story had been taken from her hands, passed from one person to another, shaped into something she never meant it to be. Still, not all of it was bad. Later that week, she was called to a small Navy-sponsored community event for veterans and youth. Her commanding officer had asked her personally. "You don't have to speak," he said. "Just attend. Just be present." She didn't want to go, but something made her say yes. The event was being held in a town not far from the one where the diner incident happened. It was a peaceful place, an open park near a river with folding chairs. A small stage, and families sitting under trees with coolers and blankets. Children ran around with flags, and a group of veterans in uniforms stood near the front, smiling. And shaking hands, Rachel arrived quietly. She wore simple clothes, gray jacket, jeans, and boots. She didn't want to stand out, but people recognized her anyway. A few came up to her, asking for photos. Some just wanted to thank her. She nodded politely, posed for a few pictures, kept walking. There was a tent set up for Navy guests, and inside were a few officers she recognized. They greeted her warmly. One of them was a former teammate, someone she hadn't seen in over 5 years. His name was Josh. Josh had always been one of the few who truly understood her. He didn't talk much either, but he saw the world with quiet eyes like hers. When he saw her, his smile was real. "Still calm in a storm, I see," he said. Rachel laughed softly, trying to be. They sat together on folding chairs, watching kids climb on a makeshift obstacle course nearby. "I heard everything," Josh said. "The diner, the video, the letters, the noise. How are you holding up?" Rachel paused. "I didn't expect any of it. I don't like being turned into a symbol. It makes everything harder." Josh nodded. "I get that. But you know, sometimes the world doesn't get to choose heroes. It just sees something and holds on to it. I didn't save lives. I just Stop two men from bothering me, yeah, Josh said. But you did it the way you do everything, with grace and control. That's rare. And people can feel it. Rachel didn't respond right away, but something about Josh's words stayed in her chest later in the evening. After a few speeches from local leaders and veterans, a woman stepped onto the stage. She was introduced as a community program leader. She held a small stack of papers in her hands. Tonight, the woman said, we want to thank someone who, without even trying, reminded us what strength can look like. Rachel froze. She didn't expect this. Commander Rachel Steele, the woman continued, is here with us. She never asked to be recognized. She didn't call the press or try to become famous. She simply stood her ground. And in doing that, she became a quiet example to many of us, especially to the young women in this town. Rachel stayed seated, but every eye turned toward her. She felt her heart beat louder, but she forced her breath to stay calm. She didn't like being on stage, but she stood. The crowd clapped as she walked toward the front. She didn't speak into the microphone. She simply bowed her head slightly and accepted the small wooden plaque they gave her. It wasn't flashy, just a carved message that read, "Thank you for showing us that silence can be powerful, calm can be strong." She stood there for a few seconds, then stepped away. No speech, no long words, just presence, and that was enough. After the event, a few young girls approached her. One of them, no older than 10, had a sketchbook in her hand. She showed Rachel a drawing she had made. It was of a woman standing with her back to the wind, facing a storm cloud. The woman's face was peaceful. "This is you," the girl said. Rachel looked at the drawing and felt something shift deep inside her. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That's beautiful." That night, when she returned to the base, she didn't ride straight back to her quarters. Instead, she took a detour. She visited the training area, again the same place where the nervous girl had been practicing weeks before. And there she was again. Still training. Still trying? Rachel walked over, tied her hair back, and said, "Show me your stance." The girl froze. "Really?" Rachel nodded. "I've got 10 minutes. The girl smiled so wide, it almost brought tears to Rachel's eyes. They practiced. Silently, slowly. Rachel corrected her hands, her balance, her breathing. She showed her how to turn, how to move without wasting energy. The girl listened like her life depended on it. After 10 minutes, Rachel stepped back and said, "Keep practicing." "Not for anyone else? Just for you." The girl nodded. "Yes, ma'am." For the first time in a while, Rachel felt something warm in her chest knot. Pressure, not fear, but purpose. Real purpose. Over the next few days, she began to say yes to a few invitations. Not big interviews or national media, just small things. A leadership session with female recruits. A quiet seminar at a veteran center. She didn't tell dramatic stories. She just talked about discipline, focus, and the importance of being steady in a loud world. People listened, not because she shouted, but because her calm was louder than most people's noise. Even Ripper wrote to her again. He had completed his first 6-week training course in self-defense. He had started volunteering with troubled teens. He said he still felt ashamed of what happened, but he had turned that shame into energy. "You taught me something I didn't know I needed," he wrote. "And now I want to pass it on." Rachel responded with a short note. "Keep going. The strongest people are the ones who don't stop." That line would later be printed on the wall of the community gym where Ripper volunteered. No one knew she had written it, but he did. Rachel still had hard days. Days when the pressure felt too big. Days when whispers still followed her, but those days became fewer. Not because the world changed, but because she began to understand her place in it. She didn't need to hide from what happened. She didn't need to explain herself. She just needed to keep being who she was. Calm, focused, steady. Not just a fighter, but a guide. Not just a moment in a diner, but a story still unfolding. Time passed, and with it, the world around Rachel Steele slowly settled into a new rhythm. The waves of attention that had crashed over her after the diner incident began to calm. The video, once viral and everywhere, was no longer the only thing people thought of when they heard her name. Instead, people started to see the person behind that moment, the woman who had lived a life of quiet strength, discipline, and deep care. Rachel herself felt different too. It wasn't that her life had changed overnight. The Navy was still demanding, the training still tough, and the days often long. But something inside her had shifted, a new kind of peace replacing the heaviness she had carried. What if expectation had lessened, replaced by a clear understanding of who she was and what she stood for? She kept riding her motorcycle, but now with less need to escape and more joy in the freedom it gave her. The open road was no longer a place to run from herself, but a space to breathe, to think, and to feel alive. One afternoon, while riding through a quiet stretch of highway, she stopped at a small roadside cafe she had never noticed before. It was the kind of place with faded signs and old wooden tables, where locals gathered to talk and sip coffee. Rachel liked it immediately, the simple charm, the easy smiles of the people who ran it. She ordered a cup of black coffee and sat by the window, watching the world outside. A group of bikers rolled in, laughing loudly, their engines roaring as they parked. Rachel recognized a few faces from past encounters, but none of them seemed interested in trouble today. She smiled to herself. The bikers had learned something. Maybe even Ripper and Duke. Rachel had also grown in ways she hadn't expected. Her phone rang. It was an invitation from a local school. They wanted her to come and talk to students about leadership and courage. Rachel almost said no, but then she thought about that little girl with the sketchbook and the young recruits she had helped. Maybe it was time to share more of her story, but in her own way, without drama, without hype. She agreed. The day she arrived at the school, she was greeted by a sea of curious faces. The students were a mix of ages, some shy, some bold, but all eager to listen. Rachel stood in front of them quietly, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves. But instead of talking about the video or the fight, she spoke about something else, about discipline, about quiet strength, about the power of staying calm when the world is loud. She told them stories from her time in the Navy, not the battles or missions, but the small moments, the long runs, the mistakes she made and learned from. She talked about the importance of believing in yourself. Even when others don't see your value, the students listened closely. After her talk, a line of children formed to ask questions. Some wanted to know how she stayed calm in difficult situations. Others wanted advice on how to stand up to bullies or how to be confident when they felt small. Rachel answered each one with patience and kindness. She told them that courage wasn't about never being afraid, but about doing what is right despite fear. She reminded them that everyone has strength inside them, sometimes hidden, sometimes waiting to be found. One boy, no more than 12, asked her if she was ever scared to fight those bikers. Rachel thought for a moment and said, "Yes, I was. Scared, but I trusted my training and believed I could protect myself." Sometimes courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. After the school visit, Rachel received messages from teachers and parents thanking her for her honesty and for being a role model. She felt proud not because of any praise, but because she had found a way to connect, to inspire others quietly but deeply. Back on base, things had changed too. The officers who once treated her with distance now approached her with respect. Her leadership was recognized not just in her skills, but in her ability to guide others with strength and humility. Rachel was promoted to a higher rank, not because of the video or the fame, but because she had earned it through years of dedication and quiet excellence. The Navy trusted her to lead bigger teams and manage more complex missions. One day, she received a letter from Ripper again. This time, it was different. He wrote about how his life had improved, not just in self-defense classes, but in the way he treated people. He had stopped hanging out with dangerous crowds and started working at a community center, helping troubled youth find their way. He thanked Rachel for showing him that strength was not about being the toughest or the loudest, but about having control and respect. Rachel smiled as she read the letter. She had never expected this kind of impact when she stood up in the diner. But it reminded her that every action, no matter how small, can ripple out and change lives. She also found peace with her own story. She no longer saw herself as just the woman who fought two bikers. She was a leader, a mentor, a symbol of calm power. But most importantly, she was herself. One quiet evening, she rode out again, this time with no rush, no escape. Just a steady ride through winding roads, the stars shining bright above her. The wind was cool, the engine steady beneath her. She felt the freedom she had long sought, not the freedom from danger, but the freedom of being at peace with who. She was Rachel Steele, knew the world might never stop talking about that moment in the diner. But she also knew that her story was bigger. It was about courage and control, about standing firm without shouting, about inspiring others through quiet strength.